Welcome everybody to, I think, one of the first of Launchpad's webinars. We're going to be talking a little bit about the global pandemic. We've got this incredible panel here that I will allow the host Miriam to introduce all of the panel and what their views are on scaling a digitally led company during a global pandemic. But before we go there, I want to just give a little bit of perspective or take kind of a step back, because this is the time of year that everybody is going to be putting their view on 2020, living in a global pandemic. What has that actually meant for ourselves and for business? And over the past year, there's a reflection that we've really gone back to basics. That we've been inside, we've spent time inside with our families, we've been in local neighborhoods, we're working from home, we're being close to those we love, and those basics and caring for those we love and the society to which we wish to protect has become so much closer to all of our hearts. And the same in some ways, it's true for energy. As we reflect over 2020, we realize that, look, energy is basic to all of our lives as well. From humans, from starting with fire many thousands of years ago, energy is a part of our lives because it enables us to get around, whether you choose an EV or a tube or an electric scooter. It allows us to cook for our friends and family. It allows us to heat our homes, particularly now, and it allows us to find the frozen peas that are at the back of the freezer when we're desperate not to go to the co-op to buy some more. In the past year, in some ways, we reflected on what energy means for us. And that narrative around energy and its basics has taken on an exponential acceleration. And in some ways, that was leading with us as BP and our commitment to net zero from February onwards. We've seen countless numbers of governments and corporations all moving towards that same goal. We've seen an entirely new narrative from an investment perspective that is all about climate tech, energy tech, renewables, assets. But the basics behind all of that is about taking energy and enabling that to become more intelligent. Because you see that we at Launchpad, we're creating intelligent energy through this really unique combination of hard assets and digital tech. And this is critical to achieving our net zero ambition. We at Launchpad also recognize that creating intelligent energy through investing in scaling companies is hard. This is really, really hard, and only a few make it, but we believe that risk is really worth it. So I have a bunch of startups and investors, because we have a couple of startups, one from our portfolio, another one kind of within the energy space. And we have an investor perspective on here as well, two from the Launchpad and also externally. How have we all been dealing with this dual challenge of this hard task of scaling, whilst also doing that in a global pandemic? So on that note, I get to hand over to Miriam Beavers, who's our head of origination as Launchpad, to be able to lead us through what will hopefully be a very interesting and insightful discussion.
Thanks, Siobhan. I'm glad to be here along with my colleagues. So why don't we start with, we could just do a round of intros and tell the audience a little bit about yourself, and maybe we'll come to some questions later, but just introduce yourself and a little bit about what you're up to these days. And I'll just go around the screen. So I'll start with Prath.
Right. Thanks, Miriam. Hey, everybody, and thanks for having me. Super excited to be here. I'm Prath, one of the co-founders of Light, an energy technology startup that I founded in 2019 with the backing of BP Launchpad. Light builds software products that deliver real-time operational insights for production optimization of hydrocarbon wells using fiber optic sensing, enabling faster, safer, and more efficient operations within the oil field. The technology has been field proven and has already added several $100 million of efficiency gains to our clients. A bit about me: I joined BP about 8 years ago, where I invented and operationalized the technology that now underpins Light's products, adding significant efficiency gains using the technology in the process. I spun Light out as an independent business from BP along with my co-founder in 2019, with a mission to further deploy this cutting-edge capability and make operations in the oil field safer and far more efficient. Before BP, I completed my master's, PhD, and a postdoc at Cambridge, where I invented what was the world's smallest gravity sensor at the time, an ultra-sensitive miniature silicon accelerometer with the potential to sense the smallest changes in the Earth's gravity field using a device that was just a few centimeters aside. This invention eventually led to the spin-out of another sensing business that is now based in Cambridge. So yeah, that's me.
Oh, wow. Great, great. So Robyn?
Hi, everyone. My name is Robyn Beavers, and I'm the founder and CEO of Blueprint Power. We're a New York City-based startup focused on the convergence of distributed energy and real estate and buildings. My background has been primarily in the energy space. I've been a leader in new energy solutions for companies like Google, NRG, and Vestas. Right before Blueprint, I was actually in the real estate side where I was working for the country's largest home builder, helping them invest in the emerging category of real estate tech. Blueprint emerged from there. We're a joint, we're basically a blend of a property tech and real estate tech play. And we're really excited about the trends we're seeing in distributed energy resources, the commercialization curves there, the demand for decarbonization from the real estate sector, the supporting regulatory changes that are happening, and essentially a whole new market opportunity for distributed power plants layered across buildings. I'm really excited about the topic of this panel. The global pandemic hit Blueprint in a number of ways, both on the energy side and with our core customers in commercial real estate. So I'm happy to discuss it with everyone here today. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Kate?
Thanks for having me here. I'm Kate Ireland. I'm an independent director on one of the Launchpad portfolio companies, Onyx Insight. Onyx is a predictive maintenance platform offering analytics to the wind turbine industry. It's quite interesting as you think through kind of the evolution towards renewables, how these systems need to adjust and how software needs to be developed to help people adjust and manage those assets. My background has been solely on the investor side. I started my career out at Goldman here in London. Have spent a long time actually looking at the kind of confluence of renewables and technology, and was looking at renewable investments in the last cycle, the last big wave of kind of clean tech excitement in the early kind of 2011, 2012. Very excited to be here. I've been very excited about the kind of opportunities that renewable kind of energy presents and the opportunities that digitally linked kind of renewable energy investment opportunities present.
Thanks so much. And I'm Miriam Eves. I head up the origination practice at Launchpad, which means I'm out hunting for new investments for us to bring into our portfolio and then help them scale. I spent many years in New York working with new technologies, creating new products and services around fintech, information, clean tech, and then also worked with BP Ventures as a venture partner, helping them find deals and work with their portfolio companies. Launchpad, which is both an investor and an operator, straddled both my interests. So I've been having a great time learning about all the looking at all the companies that we've considered investing in, being involved in the ones we have invested in, as well as helping to do the deals themselves. So we. With that, I'm gonna ask a couple questions, probably primarily for Kate, for Robyn and Prath. I mean, talk about two industries that have been incredibly disrupted this year: hydrocarbons and commercial real estate. I mean, you couldn't really pick two more that were just really at the top of what do we do now? So, would love to hear your perspective on that, obviously, but what are the opportunities? What's the good that's come out of these obviously seismic changes that are happening in both your industries, which may create more opportunities for your companies and for new ideas to come into the industries and help them along the innovation curve? So either one of you can start off, and love to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay. I can go first, Robyn, and is that okay? Very good. Okay, so what has been really positive, Miriam, is in my view, is the drive that we see today within the upstream oil industry towards decarbonization. Many oil operators are now wanting to build and implement technologies that drive further efficiencies to produce hydrocarbons as efficiently with as minimal a carbon footprint as possible. Efficiency is a factor in every part of the industry, but with the revamped focus on decarbonization and the increasing cost pressures that result from the current oil price and the pandemic, operators are now looking especially to new digital technologies to help drive the transition. This presents a unique opportunity, especially for smaller technology firms like us, as the operators are more actively looking to trial and implement new and innovative technologies that can help them get closer to their goals. The downside we've observed, however, is that the onset of the pandemic has meant there are lesser avenues for businesses like us to meet people physically and have the human interactions that enable businesses to build trust with one another, making it harder to gain acceptance with new customers and even solution new products with them. This is especially true for startup businesses who don't have much of a track record to fall back and demonstrate their capabilities with, which is very important, especially when trying to sell into conservative industry like the oil and gas sector.
Right, right. Robyn?
Sure. So a few interesting things with respect to the commercial real estate industry. Just as a quick reminder, Blueprint's built software that helps manage DERs at commercial and industrial buildings in urban cores to help generate flexible capacity and then sell grid services. And so very much our software is designed to respond to strains on the grid, which really depends on where load is happening at any given time. And that is really based on occupancy and density of people and eventually cars and consumers of electricity. So that's always been what we've done. And so what was interesting during this year was there was a major dislocation in occupancy. A lot of the buildings we thought would be very full and busy during certain times of day suddenly became empty, and other types of buildings became full and busy during the day. So commercial office empty, apartment buildings full and busy. So from a Blueprint perspective, we were ready for that change. We're all about ingesting data and making decisions based on real-time data. But of course, with our customers, there were some initial changes, namely they had to shut buildings down, they lost occupancy, and they had to go adjust to their new reality. And that was just temporarily distracting for them, understandably. But a number of interesting insights emerged after, during the summer and afterwards, which is why we're always excited to partner with real estate. One is, the real estate industry has actually experienced big challenges to their sector within the last decade. I mean, the last global financial crisis did have a major impact on real estate in different ways, and often, kind of different parts of it. But they've recently experienced challenge to their normal growth curves, and they actually took advantage of that and used that opportunity to reinvest and grow again. And so the last 10 years for commercial real estate has been one of the best growth periods for them, directly as a result of the original financial crisis in 2008. So I guess my point there is they're very good at making, and so we've definitely seen that attitude from them, especially as they look forward to continuing to add more on-site clean energy and generate new revenues from new types of. We've been really enjoying our conversations with our real estate partners as a result of this, and how creatively they're thinking about what to do next. Another interesting thing, just for all the energy geeks here on the call, I'm assuming there's many, that occupancy and building load are not linearly correlated. So in New York, many of the commercial buildings are literally empty. They're less than 10% occupancy, but they're still, in terms of their base load demand hit, it's only been, about a 20% hit. The buildings are still being run and have, plenty of loads. And in many cases, they're obligated to run, HVAC and different systems as according to their lease terms, even if people aren't there. So in terms of energy nodes that you can play around with and use as grid resources, there's still a lot of capacity to work with, and in some cases more capacity to work with. So again, just from like optimization aspect, density and load across the grid, really interesting in terms of our customers' attitude about the role of energy revenues going forward for part of the year. So there was definitely, we're in an interesting period after that now.
For sure, for sure. And Kate, from your perspective with the renewable business of Onyx, what have you seen? It's a capital intensive industry, long lead times. So I'd be curious to see your perspective on that.
Sure, absolutely. So Onyx is selling into the kind of capital intensive part of the industry. So essentially our customers are the kind of asset owners, asset operators. I think what's been interesting to see is that there's obviously a lot of growth in the space and a lot of interest in digital solutions. What kind of the place that Onyx plays in is essentially they help the asset owners, operators, and OEMs manage more effectively and manage more efficiently, and by reducing the operations and maintenance costs. And so essentially, as you kind of play the movie forward, I think we're all focusing on how do you more effectively run your business. Yeah. The fact that COVID has meant that people are not traveling to sites and actually having to manage things and adopting more digital tools is a huge kind of positive headwind or tailwind for the business. I think is presenting a lot of really interesting opportunities.
Right, right. Well, what you've all said is that business as usual was not an option either for the company, the industries you're selling into, or your companies. So, I mean, drill down a little bit more into sort of on a, as you kind of wake up and go to the office every day, have you thought, oh, we got to sort of put things off, or we got to invest more, or we got to change our sales strategies, or, I mean, how have you kind of navigated through these things to stay on track, to achieve your goals, even though they might have been a little compromised by the world situation? So we could just go on the same way again, if you like, Prath.
Sure, I can start. The two biggest challenges that impacted, and I think they still continue to impact our operations today, are one, the isolation that comes with lockdown.
Yeah.
And second is the complexities, particularly with customer acquisitions due to the virtual landscape that we live in. On the first point, the hardest challenge has been the isolation and the loss of the social connections at work. We pride ourselves in our ability to innovate at Light, but to keep that creativity up, we needed to adapt and alter the way we worked. We had done a few things to try and circumvent this. One is even simple things. We began connecting more regularly as a team, starting from setting up morning coffee breaks to even hosting company-wide demonstrations at the end of every sprint that we ran. These really did help. They helped facilitate cross-functional collaboration, more of idea sharing, which had been quite beneficial to product development and delivery. We've also noticed that one of the other challenges here with isolation is the fact that it's very easy for you to forget how important keeping cyber secure and even keeping healthy is when you're just stuck at home all day. So we made a budget available for employees to buy computer equipment to help themselves set up a safe work setup at home. And we also started using BP services to try and get people to connect on, understand do DAC assessments and things like that. The second challenge, which I talked about, was the increase in the complexity with customer acquisitions, which obviously has an impact on our cash runway as well. Being a startup with limited investment, we needed to take a good hard look into our finances to identify opportunities to minimize our cash burn and extend our runway as much as we could. And we realized that with everyone working from home, there was no real need for a physical office space, and being a digital business as well. And therefore, we decided not to extend the lease for the office that we were renting. And this obviously had a big impact on the bottom line and helped us lower our cash burn quite considerably. The second thing we did was refocus our business strategy to ensure that we stuck to our core purpose. We began cutting back on projects and activities that were the good to haves, refocusing the work scope to what would bring the most value in the short term, both to Light and to our customers.
Right. Right, and you're also looking at some new market opportunities, correct? That
Yes.
may be more accelerated, but we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
So Robyn, Prath closing down his office is exactly what you're talking about. So what have you been
Sure.
able to do creatively to move forward in this really challenging time in terms of your sales process in your company?
Sure. Yeah. So we operationally, well, so just stepping back, we're a venture-backed startup, we're early stage. So I just remember in late March, early April, all of our current investors were calling all of their portfolio companies, checking who was going to be able to survive the next 2 months or not. I mean, it was literally I spent all my entire 2 weeks on the calls with all of our investors, and they were doing the same with all their portfolio companies. So it was definitely from a kind of a venture-backed startup perspective for me and my peers, across the ecosystem, everyone had to spend time doing that first, assess what the reality was. Our investors were doing the same thing. It was just, that was the first order of business. And then, similar to Prath, we had to make, decisions around operational costs, how to make sure you can manage through kind of the uncertain months. We're on the other side of it now. There's still a lot of uncertainty ahead, but back, in March, April, no one knew what was happening, and we weren't sure how long this was going to be, what was going to happen. And everyone was planning for all scenarios. So managing through that was, our job. And that did mean trimming up operational costs. We actually still had sales conversations going on, but we weren't able to deploy some of our contracted, our contracts into actual buildings because they were closed. So we used that time to refocus inward on product and, sort of just chip away at things we thought would be later down the line, just based on like reprioritization of our timing. And finding ways to help the team stay safe and in touch. I mean, that was another critical thing, for me in the leadership of Blueprint, was how to make sure everyone was safe as best as possible, and okay. It was a really emotional and trying time for everyone for a number of reasons. And just on a personal note, it was really the extra layer for me was I was pregnant during all of this and delivered a child in the middle of it too. So there was an extra layer of complexity there, and just again, a lot of uncertainty around things like that. So I'm glad we're through it. And again, it was just a matter of like planning for kind of all the worst scenarios, frankly, and managing the company through. And I think many were able to do that, and it's really impressive to see see all the battle scars from everyone, and one day we'll all be able to feel better about it. But there's no like good way to, you just had to manage through it, and everyone had their own stack of complexities there. So
for sure. Right.
Yeah.
Right. For sure. Well, BP certainly had theirs. So, and Kate, so you've been sitting sort of on the other side of the table, helping management think through these really tough things. And what kind of advice have you given them, and have they thought through in an industry that definitely was impacted, maybe not as much as the other two, but definitely impacted?
Absolutely, no, and I'm happy to answer it in two ways, both in terms of what I saw at Onyx, but also how it changes the investor role. You no longer can actually be out originating in the same way that you used to. So in terms of the former, I think the really interesting thing is that it actually creates the opportunity to create new ways of working. And in an industry that has very long sales cycles, requires a lot of hand-holding and customer kind of engagement, you're kind of agreeing to long procurement contracts. That historically wasn't something that happens in a digital way. And I think it's been a really exciting opportunity actually for the Onyx management team, as all of a sudden they're learning about this whole kind of digital marketing kind of space and all of the opportunities that data and that engagement with a customer digitally could present. We had a digital webinar a couple weeks ago similar to this that was very, very well attended. And I think seeing these opportunities to engage with much broader and much more global stage in a kind of quite easy and relatively costless way, I think has been really exciting. And it is forcing the team to be a bit agile as I think through the new opportunities and the different kind of sales channels that this opens up. So it's been a really exciting time. I think the kind of biggest steer that I keep giving to them is to keep investing into it and to create to keep pursuing those opportunities, because there's clearly going to be disruption and dislocation that will happen, but that should create an opportunity, not a kind of strategic issue. I have to say, from the investor perspective, I've had the kind of strange circumstance of joining the Onyx board digitally and getting to know a group of people digitally, building relationships, and understanding how kind of what makes people tick digitally is certainly interesting. And it makes it a lot harder to build those relationships early days with the founder or management team, but it's not impossible. And I actually think in some ways, the great thing about COVID, which I'm sure we've all experienced, is that it doesn't matter if you're in Houston, in Vancouver, in Boulder, in London, in Singapore, you're all on the same level playing fields. And in some ways, that actually creates a really interesting dynamic where it's no longer that it's half virtual, half kind of in person for a board that may be comprised of people from all over the world. Everyone's digital. And that digital first approach actually means that you can get a lot done with a very kind of flat view of the world. You obviously have to work a bit harder, and we're all figuring out how to adjust to it, but I actually am seeing that it's a huge upside and a huge opportunity for us.
Right, and every voice is the same on a Zoom call, and whether you're a BP or a Blueprint, you have the same size screen, so that does sort of equalize it a little bit. Exactly. So, right. So, in terms of Kate, in terms of what you think investors are looking for in deals now, I mean, are they focusing on pandemic resilient, or are they just focusing on? I mean, what kind of changes in investment trends do you think are going to come out of this unexpected event?
I certainly think this is another renaissance of renewable, clean tech, kind of you name it. Yeah. It's a really exciting moment. And I do think that BP's kind of announcements earlier this year have galvanized sentiment. And I think you probably can speak to this far better than I can, but you see that across the board. And I think the hard thing about clean tech and transition is that it's often been difficult for your typical commercial VC to access because long sales cycle, difficult to prove product market fit. But there's such a resounding amount of support at this point in time that it's difficult to ignore. And I think people are figuring out how new business models can emerge that actually prove that product viability far earlier than they historically would have. And you're also seeing the adjustment on the kind of sales cycle because enterprise customers and large customers are adopting things earlier. So I actually think it's creating a lot of really interesting dynamics to invest into. And certainly kind of feels like it's really the moment for digitally led startups that are promoting the energy transition.
Right, right. Well, certainly in the energy industry, people always want proof points. And I was very struck yesterday. There was an article that's shared by Fred Wilson, who's one of Robyn's investors, who's a VC in New York that I've known for many years and writes a great blog if you ever want to follow it. But he shared this article from New York Magazine that the solution to the pandemic was created in the vaccine was actually created in the first 2 weeks of the pandemic. And had we had access to it, but for all the testing regulatory proof points, which of course you've got to do those to a point, but it's like, that's got to really put the pharmaceutical industry on their ear, right? I mean, how many lives could have been saved, how much money could have been if you could think about different ways to get something approved, right? I just found it amazing. So, I was also just wondering about this whole thing of doing business different. And you might have heard of Davos, the Great Reset, that's going to be talked about in terms of businesses having expanded agendas, right? Not only your core business, but your social responsibility. I mean, that's certainly something BP is thinking about and talking about when they say reimagine energy for people and planet. But how does that translate down to a startup that's got to like really focus on getting the returns back to those investors? Is that something you could think about, or do you just need to put it on the shelf till you get to have the luxury of a bigger company? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because certainly there's a lot of chatter in the world about that now.
I can start there, Miriam. So with Light, what we've got is a capability that can potentially be applied in multiple verticals. So in essence, what we've got is a machine learning based platform that you could use to drive insights in real time. And if you think of it as broadly as that, you could apply it in many verticals and many applications, right? But what we want to do is ensure that we go at it in places where we know there's a clear need, where the customers would want to benefit and will definitely benefit from what we offer. So the way we think about it is that that's our anchor, and doing this in the energy industry is what we think we have a clear fit in. And so we want to keep that as our anchor, but we are trying to look at opportunities outside to see where we can establish a similar high value product market fit. And that's something we are actively looking for, but having said that, the focus still remains where it is until proven otherwise, right? So it's something that we would continue to work on, and we think we're adding tremendous value. And even when you think about what we're achieving, we're trying to make production operations far more efficient, and if you can get to a point where you don't need to drill the next well because you are able to extract the same amount of oil without doing that, the efficiency gains that you get from that are tremendous. So you're making a big impact by doing what you're doing. And
Right.
That's where we want to be. But having said that, we are actively looking at other opportunities as well.
Right, for sure. Well, as we all agree, the world's going to need hydrocarbons for a while. So let's do it as quickly, as efficiently and cheaply as we can, for sure. And what about you, Robyn? How do you think this translates down to your managing and growing a business? Do we lose Robyn? She's first.
Sure. I mean, can you hear me?
Yeah,
now?
yeah. We can hear you now. Yeah. You're frozen there for a minute.
All right, apologies. Yeah. So as a startup, you're always, moving quickly and preparing for change. And so whether you design that into your product or your go-to-market strategy, that is critical. If you've gone to the point where you're launching a company to take advantage of a market opportunity, that likely means that that opportunity is new and changing. And so you have to be prepared for that. And then you have all this other risk thrown around it that you can't control. So that's just the mindset overall. And so for me, that hasn't really changed. I mean, this is not a change I anticipated, of course, the pandemic, but I assumed there would be surprises along the way. Right. So in terms for us, I mean, we are very similar to Prath. We're taking the products and the technology we've built and packaging them up in different ways for different customers and different value offerings. And that is changing. And in terms of what those are, because of customer demand and how they're changing and how our real estate owners are looking at opportunities. So we're adjusting to that. But that's what we would be doing anyway. We have a great product market fit, but then the market's changing too. So you want to not lose that opportunity. You package it up, you see like which new customer bases you can grow with. And that's just, to me, constantly what, we're doing anyway. So I guess the answer is yes, we've had to, adjust, repackage, continue to grow in ways that if on day one, I mean, actually a lot of what we're doing, I thought we would be doing, but I just didn't know this soon. So, I think it's just, I guess this is what I anticipated in some ways as, when I launched a startup.
Well, but I think we can agree it's sort of been the whopper of all surprises, right?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
sure.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And so then you both spoke about, well, actually all three of you spoke about the, kind of the frustration of being not able to be out and about. But on the other hand, the fact that the global world is more local do you think that accelerates your ability to get customers and open new markets in a faster way than you might have before? Does it make it harder because you really need to have the feet on the ground and really be in the market and really meet people and really talk to people? I mean, it could go either way or both. So
I think you hit the nail on the head there, Miriam. It goes like both ways, right? So in some instances, we do see that being beneficial, given that everybody's virtual. They can start having conversations. We're more connected in that way. But having said that, I personally believe people build more trust in others when you are there in person, when you actually are in the room with them physically, and they get to meet who's behind everything that they're buying. And even the satisfaction levels and the customer satisfaction tends to drop if they don't meet anybody and if it's all fully virtual. So we do see that impacting what we do. But having said that, we are a startup as well. We're trying to get more in front of people. So there is that limit which is coming in the way. Is my view on that.
Wow, for an extrovert, this has been torture. Introverts have enjoyed it, but not this extrovert has been like, let me out at that conference table again, right?
Yeah, it's always good to meet people, and I mean, there's a lot of the relationship builds when you go there in person, which I think
it does, and honestly does. And what about you? And what about you, Robyn? So do you think you'll be able to scale quicker or not, or less?
I mean, I don't know if it will. I do miss being in person for a number of reasons with the team. We just miss each other, and that all the stuff mentioned earlier, the camaraderie, and you can cross collaborate virtually so easily now. But I don't know. I'm looking forward to when it's easier for us to all be back in the same place. And then in terms of like my external facing job, as CEO, I do miss being able to meet in person with customers, investors, other thought partners. I mean, besides just the trust building, which I completely agree with, you also get an exchange of information in those moments that often lead to important strategic insights or asymmetric information that can be really helpful as a startup. So that is harder to have or to get. And I miss that too. But in terms of in customers and sales, yeah, I would say some of it has been completely fine to shift virtually, but you also, when we have, a lot of conferences have been virtual this year. Networking is really hard on virtual conferences, and we can't like deploy our head of sales and to go, meet everyone. It's just a lot. You just can't do that. So that's pretty hard.
I agree. And Kate, do you think this opens up sort of early stage investors have tended to invest closer to home? Do you think that this changes it, that they become more interested or open to investing far away, and that for that critical first, sort of institutional money that might go into a startup?
I think it depends. I mean, I think the issue is that all of a sudden the funnel gets opened up to everybody. Yeah. And so in some ways you're overwhelmed and you have the kind of paradox of choice because you can look at things from all over the world. As everyone said, it's a lot harder to build trust, and a lot of investing, particularly in the early stages, is about trust, believing in the founder, and really kind of understanding kind of founder product fit, not just kind of product market fit, but actually how the founder is well positioned to drive a particular company or idea. And I can't do that over Zoom. I've been trying, but it's hard because you can't really get all of the kind of aspects of a person's personality. I've met some people now in person who I've been working with virtually for months, and it's weird to kind of actually they're a different height than you thought. Everyone's the same height on Zoom. So I think this all kind of introduces some really interesting kind of questions about how access to opportunities, how filtering from an investor perspective. I think one of the exciting things I'm seeing is that distributed teams are possible, and in ways that they never could have been at earlier stages. But then that raises the question of culture, and how do you ensure that culture and people are aligned? So again, I think with every positive, there's a negative, but I do think on margin, it certainly creates opportunities for people who are agile and able to adjust kind of quickly to disruption.
Right. Well, I think we can agree you can't look somebody in the eye over Zoom and get the same read. So let's do a quick round robin and then we'll open it up to Q&A. Just love to get your views on kind of what you see in the future that's exciting for sustainable companies or sustainable technology founders and companies in this really industry that is just being turned on its head of energy. So love to give your thoughts on, what you're excited about, what you see coming down the pike. So Prath, can we start with you?
Sure. In my view, the energy sector has always looked for innovative technologies that offer efficiency gains. However, there is now a clear appreciation of the value digital technologies bring to operations, and also the value it brings to navigating the energy transition. I was reading an article recently on how data has now become the new oil, even in the oil industry, which I can quite relate to, right? So in my view, there is a big opportunity for founders looking to found innovative digital businesses as long as they address high-value pain points in this space. And I see bright future for Light as well because we're doing exactly that.
Right, great. And what about you, Robyn?
So I think there was great momentum going into climate tech and clean tech and the energy transition before the pandemic. But one interesting aspect about the pandemic for me is that it helped, I think, people understand systems issues, more tangibly. And we've kind of lost that for a while, I think, as a global society. We were focused on other things. And so it resurfaced, different perceptions of systems risks and solutions. And that is super important for climate. And that's very important for the energy transition. It's essentially a massive systems integration and transformation exercise across, the fact that, the oil and gas industry is thinking about electricity and everyone's thinking about digital technologies and cars are going to be, all that stuff. So to me, I think in a way, a silver lining of this is that kind of mentality around system solutions. And I think for startups, emerging or tackling a number of problems across this, that's imperative to be included in how you're solving a problem. And so I think it's exciting because that's something for me personally that I love and have always been intellectually stimulated by, but also thought it was necessary. And I'm glad that, that conversation is entering the innovation transition kind of conversation now too. Because often it's harder, but it's really important now.
Right. I remember my last business trip to California in early February, and there was just one reported COVID case in San Jose. And I'm like, wow, I got on the plane to come back to London. I'm like, gee, I'm so glad I dodged that bullet, right? So who knew, right? It was the butterfly wings that caused the tsunami. So what about you, Kate? What are you excited about?
So it's really interesting. So I was just reflecting, we're talking a lot about the pandemic, and we haven't really talked about the forest fires in Australia, the forest fires in California, and the kind of impacts of global warming that have become so tangibly apparent in this last year. And in some ways, kind of ironically, I feel the fact that California was not only locked in because of COVID, but also because of the quality of the air as a massively galvanizing kind of moment for a lot of people, kind of particularly in the tech industry, who hadn't really appreciated that kind of point on systems that Robyn was talking about. And I think what's so exciting is that this is going to stimulate so much focus in academia, in other realms, so much research, which has such positive downstream implications for innovation. And I think that fact in itself makes me really excited. I've spent some time in the UK government this summer, and the amount of interest from governments on climate change, on solutions, is really, really kind of accelerating. And I think that makes me really excited about the future, because if you think through the kind of amount of capital that's needed to push this, you really need to knit together kind of the private sector, governments, and innovation to really kind of make this happen. And it feels like the moment has really come.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And I for my part, to the points that you made about, all of you made about sort of level playing field, I'm really think that I'm excited about the diversity of ideas and people that are coming in this industry, both, in backgrounds and interests and perspectives that I think are going to be really critical to solving it. I think that I totally agree with you on the government, and if we see what's happening in the U.S. right now, that climate is front and center to the new administration, which is in every single department, which is, and it's, I think, an indication of the system thinking, at least that the U.S. is deploying or trying to deploy. So I think it's going to be a really great opportunity to start a business, get capital, hook up with the corporate, and get government policy to help you. So that, to all of you that are doing it. So let me, we've got a few questions that have come in from the audience. Let me just come to these and see if I can read them out. So we've got one that says, energy industry has been conservative when it comes to digital. If we combine the pandemic, climate change, and recession in the horizon, would it be a perfect storm to push the industry toward digital across every part of the business? Yeah, Prath, you could probably talk about that. You've probably touched on it a bit.
Yeah.
Want to expand on it a bit?
Absolutely. I can see that's the question from Ahmed. So thanks for the question, Ahmed. I think I absolutely agree with you. I think with what's happening now, people are getting, they have an appreciation now for digital technologies. They are looking for solutions that can help them produce more efficiently in the oil sector. They are looking for solutions that can help optimize the production cycles and also minimize the costs and the carbon footprint more than anything else. So I think there is big opportunity here, and operators are a lot more receptive than they ever were. So I think there is a big opportunity to try and get digital in a big way.
Right, I would agree with that. I would agree with that. So we've got another question that came in, which is about really the nitty gritties. How do you get more clients during a pandemic? How do you convince them that this is you have to have a sustainable strategy. You have to be thinking sustainably. This is an energy startup. It's coming from someone in an energy startup. So again, it's balancing that, sort of the short-term delivery of a startup versus perhaps some little longer-term thinking. So any advice for this founder or entrepreneur?
Just one from me. We've been going through similar conversations in Light, and what has become quite clear to us is we need to get more customer centric, bring more empathy into the sales cycle. So if we understand what the client really wants and then build solutions around, or solution products around what the high value pain point is, I think eventually you will get the fit that you're looking for, right? So that's sort of what we've been trying to achieve in Light too, and that's the advice I would give.
Right. Robyn, Kate, anything to add to that?
I would just think about the customer needs at this time and what have been heightened or deprioritized, and ensure that your product meets those needs and communicate that. So yeah, so obviously for Blueprint's customers, rents are, at risk. So they're looking for new sources of income for their buildings. So we've always messaged our offerings around it, but it's even more important. So whatever your product is, it needs to be matching what is top of mind for the customers. And in some cases, that's the same thing, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic. In some cases, it's reprioritized.
Great. Well, I think we sort of might be wrapping up here, but before I thank everyone, well, let's see, we have one more question that came in. All right, here we go. Oh, right. I think you guys have both talked about this. How do you manage to extend your runway? this year, and and still achieve your goals. So I guess sort of the balance again between cutting your budget versus going out and investing in your sales and marketing channels.
Do you want me to take that, Miriam?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Prath.
Okay, so I did talk about this very briefly before. One is looking at what we can afford to cut down, and one example of that was the office space. Given that everybody was in lockdown, working from home, there was no real need to go ahead and keep paying the rent we were paying. This is not to say that we would not go back to an office. It's just to say that we didn't have the need to do it today, which meant we didn't have to actually bear the costs there as well, which had helped. Second is getting focus. So this is just making sure that we're trying to meet the targets we need to right now. And while you have a view out for the long term, try and get to where you need to get to today in order to keep the revenues coming in. So that's the strategy we used in Light. Matthew.
So Robyn, we got a question for you. Somebody wants to know how you can repurpose commercial buildings. I think that's it. If you can solve that one, there are a lot of people that are interested in that one.
I think there's a lot of ways to think through it. I think actually the real question is how you're repurposing retail space. That's probably the more poignant question in the real estate industry. Offices will return in some fit way. Multifamily is fine. I think retail in the US is hit the hardest, and it was already heading that way before pandemic, and it was just accelerated. So there's a lot of folks thinking about that, whether they become Amazon distribution centers or nice places to store batteries for buildings, or other things. So and then in terms of commercial office, I think you'll just see different floor planning, space planning, how tenants are thinking about their space. I think you'll still get rent for the spaces. It's just how it looks inside and how people are using it for their team operations.
Yeah, I'm not sure retail's dead. I think it's just having a big, I just don't see it completely going away in a place like New York, but definitely changed for sure. So question about using other technologies like VR, et cetera, in your sales and customer engagement. Have any of your companies deployed that or thinking of deploying that?
Not yet in Light. Sorry, Kate, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's a great idea. One of the folks that I deal with always has a different background of different wind turbines, and it gets me quite excited, but that's a really interesting thing.
Right.
Yeah, we haven't done that yet, Kevin, in Light, but certainly sounds like an idea that we can go after.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, I think we're probably wrapped up on the questions. So before I thank you guys, what I'd love to do is just remind everybody that Launchpad is going to be looking for 5 new investments next year. And we'd love to hear from your startup who wants to partner with us for the energy transition and to help build businesses, leveraging BP's assets, and also just to build great global energy companies. You can follow us on LinkedIn. You can follow us. We have a blog. We can podcast. So we'd love to be engaged with you. You can send us emails if you're interested in and talking to us about how we work with companies. So anyway, thank you all so much. It was great to hear the different perspectives from New York to London, the entrepreneurs, and then the investor perspective from both the government perspective as well as the private perspective. So I think this has been a really great discussion, and I wish Robyn and Prath the best of luck as you navigate your startup through this time. And Kate, I'm sure you're providing great advice to our colleagues at Onyx. So thanks so much, everyone, and look forward to staying in touch and getting that vaccine as soon as we all can. Okay.
Thanks so much. Thanks all.
Thank you. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.